I get it. When a friend of mine started talking about finally getting a CNC router, I could see the excitement and the doubt battling each other at the same time. He'd been spending months watching YouTube builds, scrolling through forums, and trying to picture his garage turning into a mini shop without blowing his budget. The biggest question was always the same: am I buying a machine that will actually do what I need, or am I just dumping a big, noisy box on the floor that gathers dust? That hesitation is where the Genmitsu PROVerXL 2X2 comes into play. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, this isn't a little hobby cutter that only handles a 12-inch square of material. The 22 in the name really means a 2 foot by 2 foot work envelope, which translates to 600 mm of usable space. For anyone who's ever tried to make a full-size tabletop, a set of cabinet doors, or even a small batch of signage from a single sheet of plywood, that extra real estate is a game-changer. Most entry-level routers force you to split a 48 sheet into halves or quarters, which adds a lot of extra measuring, alignment, and waste. With the PROVerXL, you can clap a whole sheet, run a single program, and walk away with a finished piece that's already the right size. What makes that big area actually usable is the closed-loop motor system. Genmitsu equips the machine with NEMA 23 Planetary gear stepper motors and a 10:1 speed reducer. In plain English, the motors keep track of their position in real time, so you get tighter tolerances and less ghosting at the ends of a cut. I've seen cheaper machines where the stepper slips a fraction of a millimeter and the whole project ends up out of square. The PROVerXL's closed-loop design reduces that risk, which is especially valuable when you're trying to cut dovetail joints or router a precise pocket for a hardware insert. Now, let's talk about the rotary module kit that comes with it. If you've ever wanted to put a logo on a wooden mug, a ring on a bottle, or even engrave a curved panel, you need a way to spin the workpiece while the router head does its thing. Genmitsu's kit adds a spindle that can handle diameters from 15 mm up to 275 mm, and because it's part of the same machine you're already paying for, you don't have to buy a separate engraver. The real-world benefit shows up when a maker decides to launch a small line of custom-etched coasters. Instead of manually turning each piece on a drill press, the rotary module lets you batch process dozens in a single run, keeping consistency and shaving hours off production time. All that sounds great on paper, but there are practical trade-offs you need to weigh. The first is size. A 22-foot work area means a footprint that's roughly the size of a small refrigerator. If you live in an apartment or a cramped garage, finding a permanent spot for it could be a challenge. The machine is sturdy, which is good for accuracy, but it also means it's not something you'll want to move around once it's set up. Some users report spending a weekend assembling the frame and tightening the belts before the router is actually ready to run. If you're the type who wants a plug-and-play solution out of the box, you'll need to budget a little extra time for setup and maybe a few extra tools. Noise is another factor that often gets overlooked until the machine is actually humming. The Planetary gear stepper motors are quieter than a typical open-loop setup, but you still get a noticeable whir, especially when you're cutting dense hardwoods at higher feed rates. If you have thin walls or shared living space, you might want to consider a sound dampening enclosure or simply run the machine during off hours. On the flip side, the power draw is fairly modest for a machine of this size, so you won't be tripping your home breaker as long as you're not running multiple accessories at once. Software compatibility is a realistic concern for anyone who's never touched a CNC before. The PROVerXL works with the popular GRBL firmware and can be driven by free programs like LaserGRBL, EasyCut, or the more advanced Fusion 360 CAM workflow. If you're already comfortable with those tools, you'll feel right at home. If you're brand new, there's a learning curve. You'll need to generate code, set up material offsets, and calibrate the machine's 0 point before the first cut. That's not a deal breaker, but it does mean you'll spend a few evenings watching tutorials and doing test cuts before you get to the real project. So, who should actually put this machine in their workshop? If you're a serious hobbyist who regularly works with inch plywood, medium-density fiberboard, or even soft hardwoods, and you need to produce parts that are at least a foot across, the PROVerXL pays for itself by cutting down material waste.